Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. We are from Group 5 Session 2 presenting on continuous lactate monitoring systems, more specifically the intravenous and barometric needle type enzymatic lactate sensor. So we will be presenting on the importance, mechanism, strength and weakness, and also challenges and the future view of lactate monitoring. So firstly is the importance of continuous lactate monitoring. And we'll be okay. So what is lactate? Next. So what is lactate? Lactate is one of the substances produced by the cells as the body turns food into energy or cell metabolism. The lactate has the highest level of production within the muscles, and it is present in the form of lactic acid depending on pH. It is mostly present in blood in the form of lactate due to neutral pH maintained by the body. It is produced in excess when there is insufficient oxygen at the cellular level or when the primary way of producing energy in the body cells is disrupted. Onto blood lactate concentration. Tissue blood lactate concentration, when measured, can be used to evaluate the extent of anaerobic metabolism or tissue oxygen deprivation. Also to be used to evaluate loss of blood and impairment of circulation. Monitoring the blood lactate concentration can provide an accurate endpoint of resuscitation in the critically ill patient and can be used to detect life-threatening oxygen deficiencies within infants and can be used to be an early indicator for acidosis or bacterial meningitis and has proven to be useful for exercise monitoring.
Now to the importance of continuous lactate monitoring. The continuous lactate monitoring can change the way critically ill patients are treated within intensive critical care unit (ICU), as it can detect hyperlactatemia, in which patients have lactate levels of more than 2 millimole per liter, which is a sign of mortality in different groups of critically ill patients. It is also used as a guide in managing early directed therapy for resuscitation of sepsis patients with lactate levels of more than 4 millimole per liter, and it can also continuously monitor blood lactate levels of infants who undergoes cardiopulmonary bypass (CPB), where abnormal lactate increase could be detected quickly, and then first-line treatments can be provided. It has also reduced the hospital mortality in patients with hyperlactatemia on ICU admission when lactate levels will decrease by more than 20%. Next is the mechanism.
So thank you very much, Ame. Now I'm going to explain about the mechanism of the continuous lactate monitoring. So basically what we are trying to present to all of you guys is that we can continuously measure the lactate through the method that is being proposed by this researcher, in which they use intravenous and barometric needle type enzymatic lactate sensor. So next. So basically, this is how the structure of this lactate monitoring system will looks like. And so basically, the mechanism is similar to normal catheter. However, the difference is that at the tip of the needle of catheter there is a sensor, which is a biosensor, in which it will be used to detect the blood lactate level in the blood. And as you can see from this image here, the method that we are going to explain is actually a invasive method, in which that this sensor will be injected into the body on the blood vessel. And actually, for the lactate monitoring system, there is actually two ways in which we can monitor the lactate. The first one is the wearable sensor, and the second one is the intravenous, in which invasive. And for wearable sensor, however, it is only a limited application onto the sports people, as the sensor can only detect lactate level on the sweat. And for this method that we are trying to explain here, the lactate sensor, which is the invasive or the intravenous lactate monitoring system, will be injected into the blood for the continuous monitoring. And as mentioned by my friend just now, it is suitable to be used for, especially on patient that is critically ill or in the intensive care unit, where any fluctuation or changes in lactate must be closely monitored in order for them to provide a first line of treatment. And hence it is why we choose to present about this method. So basically the black part is where the data display and the transmission, and the sensor is at the tip of the needle. So next. Now I'm going to explain about the sensor structure. So as mentioned just now, the sensor is located at the needle type, which is at the tip of the catheter. And from this image here, it shows how the sensor components looks like. So basically, I want to emphasize to you all that the fabrication method, we can see that there's a platinum and iridium wire at the middle part. From the image there, it is the purple color one. So that is the platinum and iridium wire. So this platinum and iridium wire is being coated with the Teflon. And later, what we found from the information from the research paper is that they cut the Teflon region at 1 millimeter length to create a cavity in which that they will insert a lactate oxidase later for the sensor to be used as a lactate monitoring system. And after that, they use a silver or silver chloride wire, and it is tightly wrapped around the sensor. And as I mentioned just now, the 1 millimeter cavity will be deep coated with a thin layer of Nafion. And this thin layer of Nafion can be seen from the yellow image there at the upper region of the platinum and iridium wire. And after that only, they insert the lactate oxidase, which have been stabilized by PEI solution or polyethylenamine, and it is immobilized in this cavity. And only after that, only after the enzyme and the PEI solution crosslink have been found, only then they coat the layer with a PLGA and DBHD N2O2 layer, which is the dibutyl hexyl diamine and diazinamide diolate, and also PLGA. So this is where the improvement that have been compared to previous invasive method, in which that this layer will provide biocompatibility for the sensor to be injected into the blood vessel of body. So next. Okay, now for the structure, as I have mentioned just now, the layer of the PLGA and the NBHD N2O2 is actually providing biocompatibility to the sensor, because when the layer is being react with especially with moist, or in this case blood, then it will slowly release nitrogen oxide. And this nitrogen oxide is actually can be used, it is actually useful because it is a thrombosis inhibitor, where it can prevent blood from forming a clot on the sensor itself, which can interfere with the accuracy of the sensor. So through the use of this layer, for example, if the intravenous lactate monitoring is being injected in the blood, then it will prevent antithrombosis. And if it is being injected in the subcutaneous layer, then it will prevent anti-inflammation. And we can see from the image there, it shows from the research that have been conducted that without the layer, we can see that the top image at the right here, there is a blood clotting forming on the surface of the sensor, which can affect the accuracy of the sensor. Whereas compared to the two bottom one below, with the layer coated, then it is good biocompatibility that can improve accuracy. So next. So this is the normal location in which this invasive intravenous lactate monitoring system will be used on the patient. This is common location where the lactate sensors will be inserted on. And in the context of evaluating, this method is actually have been evaluated by previous research, in which they test this lactate monitoring system on a porcine model, which is if everyone doesn't know what is porcine model, it is a model that can represent a fully functional anatomical test. It is a pig model actually to test any in vivo testing. And next. Okay, so that's it from my part.
So for the materials, the first would be by using the platinum iridium wire, which is an alloy wire used for the chemical measurement. After that, it will be coated with Teflon, which increases the biocompatibility and also the durability. There is also a heat shrinkable tube, which is used as insulation. The silver and silver chloride reference electrode is a standard biomaterial used for is a standard material for biomonitoring sensor. So the glucose oxidase is the enzyme that will react with a lactate, and the inner layer naphion, diaminobenzene, and also resorcinol will enhance the selectivity over other neutral molecules like ascorbic acid and acetaminophen to remove the interference. After that will be the coating of the PLGA and the diazonium dilated dibutylhexane diamine. So PLGA is biocompatible, and this is used to avoid inflammatory response, which will lead to false reading. After that, the slow hydrolysis produced will be lactate and also glycolic acid. So it will produce an acidic environment, which is suitable for nitric oxide release, while also not being influenced on the enzyme activity. After that will be the Persil layer, which is used to overcome borate deactivation, since the previous experiment uses tetraphenyl borate, and also it provides a layer which limits the flux of lactate to the inner layer of the enzyme in order to provide a linear enzymatic response.
Okay, now moving on to the mechanism. So in this mechanism, I'll explain the mechanism of the biosensor itself, the subject preparation in this particular experiment, and also how they intervene, how intervention in vivo of this experiment. So for the mechanism of the biosensor, here is the focus layer of the biosensor. So first we have the outer membrane. This outer membrane is the one that is selective to allow the lactate to enter the membrane. So it has implement the immobilization technique of enzyme, which is the oxidase, and using the amperometric biosensor technique. So by referring to the image, the outer membrane here acts as a filter by only allowing lactate to enter to the region with the enzyme, and also to prevent the high influx of lactate. So once inside, the lactate molecule will react with oxygen and oxidize by the lock and key principle. So, and it will convert lactate into pyruvate and produce hydrogen peroxide as the byproduct. So the hydrogen peroxide will then be reduced into oxygen and also hydrogen. And the current produced from the reduction is used as the quantitative measurement of the lactate concentration. And since this presentation is focused on one experiment, so this is how the experiment is conducted. So first, we have the subject preparation, which is the healthy adult female pig of 42.5 kilogram. So the pig is sedated and also anesthetized. And next, some cut downs were done on both groins and also bilateral sides of the neck of the pig to isolate the femoral and also jugular veins and also the right carotid artery of the pig. Next one, the arterial 14 gauge catheter was advanced into the right carotid artery. This is to monitor the subject's systemic hemodynamic, which include the arterial blood pressure and also the heart rate. And this is also to acquire some blood samples for the arterial blood gas values that is done outside the pig. And next, 3 intravascular, which is the venous, and 4 subcutaneous lactate sensor were placed in the animal. Okay, so by referring the table 1, it shows the parameter, which is the IV1 is the intravenous 1, intravenous 2, intravenous 3. SQ is the subcutaneous, which is the SQ1, SQ2, SQ3, and SQ4, as I mentioned before. So it shows the placement location and also its performance and if any clotting were observed in the location. So IV1 was placed in right jugular vein, and the performance is close to gold standard with no clotting. Same with IV2, which is placed at left jugular vein and also show good performance with no clotting. In IV3, it was placed at left femoral vein. It shows good performance, but a little bit reduced peak intensity and also no clotting. For the SQ1, it was placed at the right neck, and the performance shown a little bit reduced. SQ2 was placed at the left neck, SQ3 at the right lower abdomen, and SQ4 at the left lower abdomen. So for the in vivo experimental interventions, so in this experiment, in order for them to create an environment where it has high lactate value, they conduct two interventions. The first one is the intravenous lactate challenge, which is the sodium L-lactate solution was infused intravenously into the pig. This is done by mixing the L-lactate in PBS solution and then infuse in infusion bag and pump into the pig at a rate of 1,500 milliliter per hour over a 15-minute infusion time. And the next one is the respiratory challenge. This is to create a secondary acidosis by hypoxia and also hypercapnia, which is done by drawing the blood from the animal, infusing the blood and then infusing the blood back to the animal by decreasing the value of 70 to 75% minute ventilation from the baseline. Next is the strength and weaknesses.
Okay, for the strengths and the weaknesses. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, for this method, the strength, it provides a continuous reading for faster first-line treatments. So there are some diseases that crucially depends on the lactate reading, such as the hyperlactemia, sepsis, and also for infants that undergo the cardiopulmonary bypass surgery, as mentioned earlier in the presentation. So any changes or abnormality of lactate level reading, it can be detected as early as possible for further action to reduce any possible casualty or mortality to increase the treatment effectiveness. And then for the second point, this method, it gives a little to zero risk of infection after the sensor and catheter placement. So by using an antithrombin catheter, which when it is exposed to moisture and body temperature, the nitric oxide will be released through this catheter housing that will be result in the antimicrobial activity that can prevent infection in the during the catheter placement period. Okay, next. For the weaknesses, the first point, it needs a specific area to place sensor in vivo to get accurate reading. So there are 7 places for the catheter sensor placement in this study, where 3 in the intravenous and 4 in the subcutaneous. So 4 out of the 7 reading were accurate, which all in the intravenous, which is in the right jugular vein, left jugular veins, left femoral veins, and 1 in the subcutaneous, which only at the left neck. It shows the mean absolute percentage error of 20% or less, which it can be classified as clinically accurate. While the other 3 places of subcutaneous, which are at the right neck, right lower abdomen, and also left lower abdomen, it shows higher mean absolute percentage error that are caused by the inadequate circulation or perfusion at the subcutaneous tissue due to the limited movement of the subject. So moving on to the second point, the effectiveness of the sensor is depend on the nitric oxide release. So it is using a special antithrombin catheter which composed of coating the PLGA containing the 33% weight of the appropriate nitric oxide donor DBHD N2O2 that can release the nitric oxide at the relevant rate for at least 7 days. And when it is exposed to the internal environment such as the moisture and the body temperature, the nitric oxide released through the catheter housing will also result in the anti-platelet or anti-thrombotic activity that can prevent the thrombosis or fibril formation at sensor site. But when the catheter housing stop releasing the nitric oxide, the output reading of the sensor will change significantly, and so the measurement, the reading cannot be used anymore due to the adhesion of activated platelet forming at the sensor placement surface. So after 7 days of nitric oxide decrease, it will affect the performance of the sensors. Next, Abdullah will explain more on the challenge and future view.
Okay. For the challenges, hello, yeah. For the challenges, first I need you to understand that all challenges, which I'm going to mention, is due to the material incompatibility with the human body. So our body will act with them as a foreign material, and normal physiological responses will be triggered to the implanted biosensors, such as cell adhesion and FBR. So the development of a truly biocompatible material is the most significant challenge, and they tried to minimize this normal reaction by coating the biosensor with a layered format from the bio-based material, such as BLGA, as my friend mentioned. Though the coating is capable of diminishing the normal physiological reaction to the implanted biosensor, but still it doesn't completely prevent it. Next one, which is the cell adhesion and thrombus formation. In this process, the Willebrand factor and fibrogen will play a key role since they allow the platelets adhesion on the device surface. Then the platelets will be accumulated, as you can see in the picture. At the end, the thrombus will be formed. For the FBR or foreign body response, it's actually an advanced phase after the thrombus formation. Simply, the immune system will be triggered to engulf this thrombus, and this will ultimately lead to the fibrous encapsulation of the sensor. For the last challenge, which is the sensor drifting, this may happen, for instance, the biosensor may touch the blood vessel wall, and this will affect the reading and the measurement, and it can be avoided if the material has a dynamic response. So if you notice that all the challenges which I mentioned, this related to the material used in the biosensor. Moving to the next point. For a chance for Commercialize, the concept of making portable biosensor to provide a continuous measurement is a promising, but still there is some issue have to be solved and some consideration to be taken before going to this to the Commercialize phase. The first one, which is the material development. As I mentioned, if the material is completely biocompatible with the human body and also have the dynamic response, this can also prevent many issues, and also it will be safe to use for the patient. The second one, which is the reliability, deals with with the real clinical samples. This we need to make sure that the biosensor is capable of dealing with the real samples, because when they usually when they testing the biosensor, this may not have the same condition as which in the real case. So that we need to make sure again that the biosensor is capable of dealing with the real samples. The last one, which is the biosensor must be appropriate for the mass production, because usually the biosensor is manually made. So that if we want to make sure that we have a lot of or the big production from it, we need to make sure that this also can go under the autonomous synthesis. That's it. And that's for us today, and thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentations. Now we open for Q&A section. Yes, anyone have a question?
Hello, yes, I have a question.
Yeah, hello.
Okay, I want to ask the group, has this method been utilized on human subjects? Has it been used on people before? Because like the example that you showed us is for a pig. So I'm just asking, has this system been used by a human before, or is it still in research and development phase?
Okay, Maisara. So for your question just now, basically the concept of intravenous lactate monitoring system is almost similar to currently existing methods such as CVC, which is central venous catheter. So it might through our findings and research, this method have been used. However, through the method that we are presenting today, in which intravenous ampherometric needle type enzymatic lactate sensor, where there have been improvements made in which they coat the layer with the material that I've mentioned before in order to improve the biocompatibility. So for this type of improvement, the testing for the human testing haven't been conducted yet, and it is only based on the evaluation on a porcine model test subject. So that's is it. Am I answering your question?
Yes. So basically, the method that you're showing is still in development phase, and there's not sufficient data for human lah.
Yes. However, the findings that is being obtained from the evaluation do promise significant improvement that can be used for later for the continuous human monitoring lactate system.
Okay. Thank you. That answered my question.